is happening, everybody? My name is Beth and welcome back to Every Day is Spooktober. Today as you can tell by the title, by the thumbnail, I watched Hellraiser. Quick backstory before I get into the review of this. I wasn't actually going to do a review of this film, mainly because when I watched the film and I got to the end of it, I was like, okay, I know what kind of film this is and it's not my kind of movie whatsoever, and that's absolutely fine. I'm not shitting on it. I'm not saying it's a garbage film. I just think that like my input wasn't super valid because like I'm not really a fan of the movie, and I think there's definitely a big audience for Hellraiser and the sort of series, and you know, it's a fairly long series and everything that comes along with it. It's just one of those horror series that's very fantasy, and I think there's quite a niche sort of group of people that you know, are like super fans of this. I guess you could maybe argue that this does have a cult following and it's a cult film as well as like a cult series, because it's not 100%, it's not for everyone, and unfortunately this wasn't for me. Something that's quite funny though is a few months ago I ordered the Hellraiser series, like the DVD collection, because I thought, I've never seen it, I've heard people rave about it, and like Pinhead looks so fun and interesting, and I was like, I want to just explore and see what this is about. I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't hate if I had the series, but basically what happened is I ordered it, the packaging was like really damaged, and I was like, I want a collection of DVDs that will last for a while, and it was falling to pieces, and I paid quite a bit of money for like a collection of the Hellraisers, and I like ended up returning it because I was like, I'm not paying that much for you know, like a case that's like crumbling. So it was obviously very old, it was secondhand, which is normally how I get all my DVDs, as secondhand. I never really buy them as new unless there's DVDs I really want to buy. So yeah, like that I could have owned the series, but I don't. And I mean, in a way, I guess I would say I'm glad. I wouldn't be angry if I owned it. It's just not my kind of thing, and that's absolutely fine. You know, everyone's entitled to their own niches and things that they like and things that they don't like. So yeah, you know, I was browsing Amazon Prime the other day and I saw that they had a bunch of the Hellraisers for free on there, and I thought, let's just give it a go. I was once going to watch the entire series, so let's just see what it's about. And it could be a really good review series. Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't going to make a video about this, but I have, because I do just want to address it. I want to talk about it. It's just not like, in my opinion, I didn't think it was like a worthy review, because I feel like I said before, my input isn't that valid, and you know, hardcore die-hard fans for this are probably going to hate everything I say about it because they understand it more than I do, which is completely fine, but I still want to talk about it. It is a horror film, you know, it's an old horror film as well, and there was some really interesting and fun aspects about it, don't get me wrong, and let's just talk about it. So like I said, I didn't know much of anything about this apart from Pinhead, which is quite a popular sort of horror character. Like, we see him, I've always seen the guy and the character, and he looks freaking cool. Like, he looks cool. Like, Halloween costume for sure next year. Yes. You know, I've just never known sort of the story or the premise of it, or where it sort of originated from. I started with the original that came out in 1987, and I thought, you know what, a 1980s film, like, I'm so down. I had no idea what this was about. I didn't know what it entailed. I just knew that it was quite heavy, I guess, for the time. So it was quite bloody, it was, you know, gory, there was bad language, there was a lot of sex, like there was a lot going on for the time. And I still think there is, watching it now. Like, it is a pretty heavy film. We follow Julia and Larry, who are this married couple. They've both sort of been in other relationships, and Larry has a daughter, and they come together and they remarry. So it's like an interesting family dynamic, because we already sort of know that it's not perfect. And then we end up finding Frank, which is the brother of Larry, who, from when we first meet him, is a literal, like, just like a pretty much a piece of nothingness. You know, I think the story was was good. Like I like the fact that this was a story, you know. I think when you sort of dig deeper into like the franchise of the Hellraisers, you definitely could think of this more of a like heavily driven like cult, like demonic group that like kills people and it's really bloody, like, you know, and doesn't have much story to it. But this definitely was like it was an interesting story, you know. It had a lot to sort of do with sacrifice and like commitment and you know, doing each other wrong, I guess. Like there was lots of lying and sex and things like that. And I think it really added well to the story of just sort of, you know, Julia helping Frank become fully human again after being captured by Pinhead. I think the opening sort of scene where we just see Frank getting like tortured and essentially killed. Obviously, we don't really know what happens to him. I think that's a good opener to like make you intrigued for sort of the rest of the film. It's definitely a common sort of sequence, I think, of scenes that we have seen during sort of the 1980s time of horror. It's very common to like show like a little glimpse into like what's already happened and then continue on with another story and then sort of bring the beginning into it somehow. So I give the story props. Like, it was entertaining, it was engaging, you wanted to just know more. And you know, something that I didn't particularly like is that we didn't get more of like this other world. And I'm completely aware that with the franchise we obviously explore this other world inside this box a lot more. You know, this was more of just sort of like the real world and then this sort of demonic world meet, and they, you know, and sort of they face off and just see what happens. I think it was like an interesting first movie. Obviously there's not a ton that I can say because I don't know what essentially is the wrap up to the series. I don't know what happens in all the other films, you know, and maybe things are a lot different and there's a lot more for me to know. Will I explore those films? Probably not. Maybe there's a chance, but I'm not fully super interested in this. You know, when we started to see these creatures from the other world, it was giving me very much like sci-fi-y, like monsters from another world, like Doctor Who. Like, it was giving me very like different vibes, and I was like, this is very much like, for example, like all the Marvel films. It's like one of those very like set pieces of cinema that people love and they follow, but there's only sort of like a set audience for it. Like, not everyone likes the Marvel films, not everyone likes you know, all these superheroes. Like that there's a very specific audience, I think, for the Hellraisers, and that's absolutely fine. It's very fantasy driven, it's very out of this world, crazy, bad shit, weird, you know. I when I was watching the film, I was like, you could so argue that this is like the 1980s of Saw. Like, this was very bloody, and that was one of the aspects that I really liked about it. Like, I do love me some gore, and it was interesting, you know, like the once again just sort of seeing when this was made and then looking at films that have been made over the past like 20-30 years. Like, there's a lot of inspiration that you could say this film, you know, people have taken from Hellraiser, and I'm sure with the other films in this series that are a lot more. You know, I think it's so interesting to see. Like, for me, it's like a history lesson. It's like learning about what came first, and obviously this came before a lot of like the gory bloody films. Like, you have Hostel, like you have Saw, I Spit on Your Grave. Like, we have all these gory films, and I think it's so cool to just see what came before it, because you can see the comparisons, you can see the differences, and you can see the adaptations. So I really do respect Hellraiser for what it did, and I'm not, like I said, I don't have any hate towards it. It's just very like fantasy kind of film that I don't connect well with. You know, I find it hard to connect with like very fantasy, like Lord of the Rings type of films, and that's just my personal opinion. No, I have no offense against anyone that loves the Hellraisers. Like I said, I may get into it. I did really like this film, and I'm super glad that I've seen it. It's just not for me. It's not my kind of film. Although amazing choice of actors, you know, great story, a very horror. It's a very, you know, the film is driven by the story, which is very uncommon for horror, because horror is normally driven by simple things like jump scares or creatures or ghosts or demons, rather than like an actual good story. And I think there's just a lot of cool aspects about this film. So yeah, that's just sort of my thoughts on Hellraiser. If I'm quite honest with you, I genuinely don't know what I would rate this. Maybe this will change in the future, but off the top of my head, I'd probably give this like a 6 out of 10. You know, it was a fun film, especially for its time. It was, I'm sure during the time, it was a crazy freaking film. It's like the first time everyone saw Saw before all these other gory films. Like the first time you see that kind of stuff, it's just insane. And I still got that feeling from this film, and I love that. I really do. So thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know what you think about Hellraiser. Have you seen all of them? Do you really think I should watch all of them? Let me know your thought. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, please, and I will see you guys on my next video.